Great to see everyone. Today's roundtable with Sid centers around AI, open source, and open core companies. AI investment just set another record-breaking round last week. I think everyone probably saw that in the news, so we can think of a more pricing or timely topic. So Sid, first question for you. How do you see AI changing the way software is built and the profile of startup founders?
The profile startup founders, I'm not sure about that, but I think the engineers you hire to work on the product, you want people who are eager to embrace AI. And by now, they should have embraced it already. We've seen that especially senior engineers are sometimes reluctant to embrace AI. Now, AI works better in coding for new code bases for smaller code bases, while the senior engineers are typically focused on large code bases, existing code, really kind of problems that require a lot of context. It's really important that they are eager to embrace it.
We'll see more founders who are more idea generators versus the traditional hacker types. This is kind of thinking about someone can come up with a business idea and start leveraging AI to build their code versus traditionally that's been a barrier for people who don't have that technical background.
Yeah, I think the founders, like it's easier now to start a new project. So slowly but surely, you'll see that change to where the idea generation is even more important. But I think for now, we've seen that although you can kind of vibe code your application, you can have the AI generate most of the code. That hits limits pretty quickly, and you still need people who are good hackers.
Mhm. And next question is more related to open source as well. How do you see AI impacting the way build and maintain open source software? Is this different from kind of traditionally building a software product?
I don't think that's happening. I do think that AI is kind of creating I don't think that's happening because software development, a proprietary or AI, there's not that much differences. So both are being changed. One really interesting thing I do see is that because AI is evolving so fast, open source and open core products have an advantage because they can collaborate quickly with their users. And one area where you're seeing this is in the coding products themselves. In the beginning, it was Copilot and Cursor. And right now you see Klein and Row coming up because the innovation is happening so fast. The new models are coming out really fast. Best practices are discovered, and the open source projects have an advantage because they can just merge whatever the users are suggesting, and the proprietary products are less fast. So, in an area of rapid innovation, open source, open core has an advantage.
Yeah. Has AI changed how OCV companies should think about hiring software engineers? You mentioned this a little bit earlier in the first question. If we want to get into more specific detail, is it more important to recruit someone who is really familiar with the open source project and the code base, or someone who is really good at using AI?
Yeah, thanks. Preferably both. It'd be very strange if someone isn't using AI today to help with their coding. It's not even maybe being good at using AI. If you're a good engineer and you're open to it, you should be good. Maybe someone started doing it late, that's fine. But if they aren't using it, that's a signal they're reluctant to use it, and that's a big problem. AI doesn't make up for not being familiar with the code base or not caring. They care about the project that some people have. So that's still important. It's no substitute for that. But if someone hasn't experimented with agentic coding, that would be a huge red flag.
And you mentioned vibe coding earlier in the conversation. Can series companies use vibe coding as part of their strategy to ship quickly?
Yes, they can. For anyone who hasn't heard the term yet, first of all, get more familiar with AI. Second, it is the shift from AI as autocomplete to completely programming the application. AI, until kind of a year ago, before Sonnet 3.5, was augmenting humans. You were writing code and the AI would add to it. Now you can just ask the AI to make the entire application. And that's called vibe coding. And of the last Y Combinator batch, 25% of the companies have more than 95% of their code made by AI. So that's mind blowing. And these are not the less technical companies. Typically, there were extremely technical founders who did this. So very much possible. At the same time, AI bloat is also real. AI typically duplicates more code. So you quickly see an expansion in the number of lines of code. The AI uses more lines of code to create the same functionality. And that duplication leads to problems when you want to build upon that code. Now you have to make changes in multiple locations. You start hitting this wall. Not in the least place because the context windows, although rapidly expanding, still don't allow for everything to be fed to the AI. So if your code base quickly expands, it gets harder to build on top. So I've seen projects kind of hitting a wall there and reverting back to more human-written code. I think all of this is a temporary problem. It's going to get better due to bigger context windows, due to the AI kind of better prompts that instruct the AI to have less duplication and the AI getting more intelligent and preventing duplication. But for now, that's where people hit a wall. But it doesn't hurt to start off like that, and you can always rewrite what the AI has written. Speed is more important than anything.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this with more technical founders at YC, also vibe coding and using these tools. But very broadly, I've looked at like the Bolts and the Lovables of the world that are kind of pitching build a full application with natural language. And a lot of what they're positioning around now is like rapid prototyping. And when I look at a lot of the companies in the OCP portfolio building like deeper, lower level infrastructure, it's hard for me to imagine the relevance of those tools for those types of companies. And then I look at like AI cogen more as the adjacent supporting tools, which are review a PR for bugs before you merge it, or like do code search to understand context and breaking changes before you submit. And I wonder, maybe it's wrong for me to think about those as like binary tools because I know like Cursor spans the spectrum. But I wonder if you see like for serious companies and serious engineers, is there a bifurcation in the tool set that's available?
No, I think that's a great comment. All of our companies will have an existing code base. So you're not starting with like a prompt. So I think it's actually the Graptile and Momentic for code review and code testing. That's great. And I do think you're right. I think despite that, sometimes prototyping is handy, even if it was to have a customer conversation. Like customer asks you for a feature. You can vibe code that in an hour and then show the customer a working prototype of how it would look. That is a much better conversation than a PowerPoint or something like that. Send them a URL.
Yeah, I remember how transformative it was when Figma prototyping became a thing 5 years ago. Startups were able to get much further down the sales pipeline by showing a customer like a more dynamic demo. And I think this is like a supercharged version of that. This like touches on another theme. For me, it's not just like how do you use AI cogen to write production software faster? It's the way that companies operate and think about products is accelerating even outside of like production code. And so one is prototyping. I think another one is just like how you use enterprise search internally. Like you end up creating all of this context about how your company operates. You know, say I think what you've written on like how the handbook works at GitLab, how we've tried to do it at OCV. And I just think about how that looks today versus how it looked 4 years ago. Even beyond like engineers writing code, it's how do your everyday employees understand corporate policies and historical context on customers, how dynamic your CRM is changing pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Thank you. You want to read the next one too, because that's very much fits into this.
If you were an open source author with a 10-year-old project, how would you think about leveraging AI in the project today? And there's actually a company I have in mind, OpenEMR. I don't want to say old, but it's like a 10-plus-year-old project with a large legacy, messy code base. I think there are like even pre-AI questions about how you approach a project like that when we're building enterprise features on top. But I think in the AI era, that question is compounded.
That's a PHP code base. I'm curious about the ability to kind of rewrite according to best practices. AI tends to be really good at following instructions. So if you have a bunch of best practices written out, maybe you can use it to quickly clean up some of the crud in the code base. That'd be very interesting. Zooming out from that specific project, I think how to leverage AI in a project today, I'd really encourage the engineers to use agentic coding, even if like you're not going to vibe code your entire thing, still encourage them to use Klein, Rho, Kilo, give them unlimited credits. Maybe not really unlimited, but like don't be stingy on the amount of tokens they can use. Give them the authority to use, let's say, $500 a month or something like that in credits. Use it for all the enterprise apps or the apps you use internally. So I think Rich mentioning search is a good one. I consider getting a Claude account for the company. Even the people doing bookkeeping should be using AI. Use vibe coding for prototypes, customer previews, exploration, and use other tools like Reptile, Momentic. Think about what's special about your project. Like you want to rewrite an old code base in a different programming language, or you want to adhere to more coding standards, or you want to kind of do some cleanup. AI can be great for that. You got to explore whether it works, but if you can find the right prompts, it can be really amazing.
And switching gears a little bit, this question could be for both Sid and Rich. Why is it critical to inject AI into every pitch deck for companies that's thinking, in the middle of their fundraising process?
Someone wrote a great answer, but it wasn't me. But I totally agree with the answer. Who wants to read it?
I think that was me and Erica. I'll summarize. I think every VC is always looking for like, why does this company exist today versus 5 or 10 years ago? There's a Sequoia partner that made a comment once that really stuck with me that every dollar they've ever made has basically been on the back of some like tectonic technical shift, the move to the cloud, the move to mobile, and ultimately big data. And so I bring up this meme a lot of like the dimwit and the ninja and then the midwit in between. And I feel like every one of us is saying, add AI to your pitch deck. And it's like the dimwit saying that, and then the ninjas are saying that. And the reason why the ninjas are saying it is because I think there's always going to be a hype cycle around technical shifts like this. But I think it's so demonstrably better and impressive at this point that I think there's a real belief that there's going to be a new generation of enormous companies built because of the green field that these tectonic shifts create. And so for me, if a founder is not taking advantage of the fact that they're living in a moment in time where there's a clear why now, like most of the companies in the portfolio, we can go one at a time. Like there's a reason why this could exist in a much bigger way than it existed previously. It's not just a missed opportunity from the founder, but it's almost like a naivete that they haven't thought deeply about how either they're a beneficiary of this huge trend or that they're going to be blindsided by it. It's almost more conspicuous at this point for AI to be missing from a pitch deck than it is to be included in it. One of the questions that came up, and I'll use a specific company in the portfolio as an example. So Locus does performance and load testing. It's an open source project for performance and load testing. And as they think about AI, there's like two categories that they're thinking about it. One is, how does this create a new class of customers? Like who are the AI or agentic companies that need to test things in a way that the incumbent solutions don't allow them to do? It's like there's a new need that creates in the market and a new class of customers that just simply didn't exist 2 years ago. I think the other one is, how do you build this product in a way that allows it to do things for even their existing customers that weren't possible before AI existed? So in their case, they see two limiting factors every time they onboard a new customer. Do they have the human resources to write the load tests? And do they have the human resources to interpret them once the results come in? And then, my dimwit VC mind says, ding, ding, ding. That's the opportunity where AI should exist within the product to allow your customers to get far more value out of this than they were able to get ever before. How do you allow load testing and performance testing to be a part of your CI/CD pipeline in a way that doesn't require a human to do like some asynchronous test at some chunked moment in time versus this is a thing that's happening automatically at all times, every time you commit new code. So that was the genesis of the questions. I find myself in every pitch deck telling founders, how's AI on the deck?
Exactly. And there's no excuse for it. It'd be silly if you couldn't use AI to revolutionize whatever software market you're in. It's impossible to not use AI to make it better. This is one of those times like the internet or the cloud or mobile that's taking off really, really fast. AI traffic to shopping sites rose 12,000% or 12x in half a year. Like those are silly numbers. Those are like internet numbers. Stuff is really changing really fast. If all of these arguments haven't convinced you yet, now, first of all, that's a you problem, so work on yourself. Second, you are literally making it impossible for the investor to invest in you if you cannot articulate an AI strategy. They are not allowed to invest in you. You will not pass approval by the entire committee if they cannot articulate an AI strategy. So it's like, even if you don't believe anything we've said, you still have to do it.
I get this question a lot, Sid, and I have not formed an opinion on it yet, so would love to kind of preview it with you. When we're recruiting CEO candidates and even CTO kind of project authors at this point, the question of whether the goalposts have shifted for fundraising milestones because of the comps in the market around AI companies that get from like 0 to 30 million in ARR in like 18 months. Being an AI native company or not, the landscape is shifting so quickly. It's hard for me to have a good read on what like a good follow-on seed round milestone looks like right now.
I think we're in a revolution and it's changing all these things. The investors expect more growth. Everyone expects more rapid innovation out of the project. Pay for people who are really good with AI is much higher. At the same time, if you have a clear AI strategy and you can show fast growth, fundraising is faster. There's an enormous eagerness for investors to invest in AI, and there's too few opportunities. So if you have fast growth and you can articulate why AI is changing the game and how you're embracing it, you will have an easier time fundraising.
So you recently mentioned that investors are starting to be more interested in user-facing AI applications versus LLMs. What do you see are the biggest opportunities for open core companies in AI?
There can only be so many LLM winners, and there's kind of 5-6 companies right now. That doesn't make sense for investors to invest in 100 more. So it's now also all about the applications. We already talked extensively about how the existing startups and the existing open source projects should be going faster with AI through vibe coding, AI-assisted tools, all these things. One thing where we've been really impressed is with our portfolio company Mermaid that allows interfacing with the AI. AI can draw diagrams, but they can write text, and a Mermaid can put that text into a visualization of that, and that's been enormously successful. So anything that helps you kind of talk with the AI. Neuralink is not an OCV portfolio company, but that's on a spectrum, and anything you can do there. But I think the biggest opportunity is, hey, software is going to be revolutionized. Just up the pace of your company by embracing AI, and don't allow people in your company to not embrace it. There's no excuse for that. If engineers are reluctant, make sure that it's a requirement to stay at the company.
Yeah. And to embrace AI, what factors should founders consider when evaluating which LLMs to integrate with?
There's a bunch. I think overall, one spectacular thing we've seen, the move to generic models. Like 2 years ago, everyone thought you're going to have models for every problem. Right now, it seems that just going to be generic models and you give them the right prompts, and that works well enough. I think there's enormous power to bigger context windows. Google's new Gemini 2.5 with a million token context window, I think is super interesting for portfolio companies. in general, you can just try the best three, typically OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, see what works better for your case, where you can get the best pricing, the best load limits, the best limits, query limits. Also, your customers might have preferences. Some industries gravitate to certain things. Some customers, especially highly regulated ones, feel more comfortable with cloud-hosted models. So they don't want you to go directly to Anthropic. They want you to run it on AWS Bedrock. So that might be a consideration. But in general, like, be ready to move to new models quickly. I think that's the most important part, because they're getting better at such a rapid pace, both the quality of answers, the cost coming down, but especially those context windows, and those really help with the complex questions that your application is hopefully answering for people.
Yeah. And Rich had a follow-up on this around open source LLMs.
You kind of called it, where I remember 6 months ago, the conversation was like, it's a scary world when OpenAI and maybe one or two other players like dominate the market with these massive, closed source foundation general models. And it's a better world for us to live in if there's a long tail of both purpose specific and general models that are open source that could be like self-hosted and fine-tuned. It seems like no one's having that conversation anymore. There are companies like Hugging Face that I think are still like serving models. You still have people that are fine-tuning general models and benchmarking well, but it does seem like there's been a shift towards the big three, and everyone else is going to kind of like maybe live in these niche worlds. But most OCV companies, if they're using an LLM under the hood, are going to be swapping between Gemini or Anthropic's latest model or OpenAI's latest model.
I think that's where we're at. My open source heart beats for all the open source models. So grateful to everyone doing that, like Mistral, Meta, DeepSeek. That's really great. I think as our portfolio companies don't feel obliged to use that. Typically, the proprietary models are between 1 and 4 months ahead of that. Just use the latest and greatest. At some point, there might be kind of pricing pressure where you want to use something cheaper, and you might switch to an open source model like DeepSeek. But I think the time for that is when you're at scale. The time for that is not today.